They might have found much that was reassuring about Hillary Clinton's manner. And visual counts.
I've got two people on deck. Steve Schmidt first, then Chris Matthews down at the campus. Steve?
Look, I'll just make this point, and I think it's almost unfathomable, but as he ran out of gas and he became more incoherent on the back half of this debate, and we look at the last couple of minutes, we went into a conversation with the Republican nominee talking gibberish about nuclear weapons.
Mr. Trump, that birther moment got a lot of attention, Mr. Trump. Do you say what you said?
Well, why don't you speak to Wolf Blitzer, because I got to see that on Wolf Blitzer.
But in terms of just she was explaining what happened because she was there.
Why don't you
and she said that what she fired a volunteer for was in trafficking in saying that he was a Muslim, not about birtherism.
So why don't you do this? Why don't you see the reporter from McClatchy? Why don't you speak to Sidney Blumenthal, because he's never going to tell you the truth. But why don't you also just take a quick look at what she actually said to Wolf Blitzer?
So will you apologize for that birther past, Mr. Trump? That was a moment.
No, I was very proud of the fact that I was able to get him to put up his birth certificate, and Hillary Clinton failed because she can't bring it home. I mean, she just can't bring it home, and she'll fail with jobs, and she'll fail all the way along the line, and I think we proved that tonight. She failed with getting him to do it. I got him to do it, so I'm very proud of her.
Will you accept the outcome of this election, Mr. Trump? You never answered that question.
Say it.
Will you accept the outcome of the election?
Oh, yes, absolutely, I will.
Mr. Trump. All right, Savannah, that was a live look at Donald Trump walking through the spin room. His campaign manager,
Donald Trump doing the rope line of press. His comments self-explanatory. Steve Schmidt, you forgive me, we had to interrupt you in mid-thought.
Sure.
I think that you said earlier, Nia, you nailed it, that there need to be some, you go get them girl moments.
I got to jump in. Dana Bash, Dana, let's
there
go
was
to
some
Dana
go get them girl moments.
Dana.
And my question for you is, first of all, it sounds like you admitted that you hadn't paid federal taxes and that was smart. Is that what you meant to say?
No, I didn't say that at all. I mean, if they say I didn't, I mean, it doesn't matter. I will say this. I hate the way our government spends our taxes because they are wasting our money. They don't know what they're doing. They're running it so poorly. Whether it's spent in Iraq or wherever they're spending it, they are wasting our money. So I do hate the way our government spends our money.
Patty Solis Doyle just said on CNN that she didn't actually say what you said that she said, that she didn't fire.
Because I got to see that on Wolf Blitzer.
But in terms of just she was explaining what happened because she was there, and she said that what she fired a volunteer for was in trafficking in saying that he was a Muslim, not about birtherism.
So why don't you do this? Why don't you see the reporter from McClatchy? Why don't you speak to Sidney Blumenthal, because he's never going to tell you the truth. But why don't you also just take a quick look at what she actually said to Wolf Blitzer?
Did you take the bait? Did you take Hillary Clinton's bait? That was a moment.
Well, I was very proud of the fact that I was able to get him to put up his birth certificate, and Hillary Clinton failed because she can't bring it home. I mean, she just can't bring it home, and she'll fail with jobs, and she'll fail all the way along the line, and I think we proved that tonight. She failed with getting him to do it. I got him to do it, so I'm very proud of her.
But what changed, sir?
You never answered that question.
Say it.
Will you accept the outcome of the election?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Thank you. All right, that was a live look at Donald Trump.
I happen to have the tape of Marshall McLuhan here, so let's play what Patty Solis Doyle originally said on Wolf Blitzer.
You just tweeted a couple of tweets. Let me put them up on the screen. Hillary Clinton or her '08 campaign did not start birther movement, period. I was there. And then another tweet. I fired the rogue, and I called David Plouffe to apologize for said rogue. All right, so what does that mean? You fired the rogue. Someone in the campaign, someone who was supporting Hillary Clinton was trying to promote this so-called birther issue. What happened?
Well, so the campaign nor Hillary did not start the birther movement, period, end of the story there. There was a volunteer coordinator, I believe, in late 2007, I think in December, one of our volunteer coordinators in one of the counties in Iowa. I don't recall whether they were an actual paid staffer, but they did forward an email that promoted the conspiracy.
The birther conspiracy?
Hillary made the decision immediately to let that person go. We let that person go. And it was so, beyond the pale, Wolf, and, so not worthy of the kind of campaign that certainly Hillary wanted to run, or that we as a staff wanted to run, that I call David Plouffe, who was obviously managing Barack Obama's campaign in 2007, to apologize and basically say that this was not coming from us. It was a rogue volunteer coordinator, and this was not the kind of campaign we wanted to run. And David very graciously accepted my apology.
So that's the what Donald Trump was originally referring to. Anything more on this? Because again, he brought up Sidney Blumenthal. Your response to that is
Sidney never worked for us, and Sidney,
but he is very
denied
close
his
to very close to Secretary Clinton and was part of the foundation.
Yes. But he never worked for our campaign.
But his larger point is this: the idea of President Obama somehow being an other originated with Hillary Clinton's campaign. In fact, it was called the sleaziest moment of the campaign by a New York Times columnist when Hillary Clinton went on air and said Barack Obama is not a Muslim as far as I know. When Hillary Clinton's campaign circulated a picture of Barack Obama in native headdress, it was called by Barack Obama dirty trick. So this idea that it started with the campaign is true.
Haley,
and I agree with Donald Trump when he said let's move on and talk about ISIS and talk about jobs, because it does a disservice to the American people to linger
He
on
wants
this.
to continue to talk
Okay,
about
He
it.
doesn't.
David, you were,
again, I feel like I have to bear personal witness to this. I was there. This was not a big effort that was launched by the Clinton campaign, but I also was there in the White House when Donald Trump pressed this issue for years even after the president released his birth certificate. But the bigger issue is, do you think it's profitable in a presidential debate for him to be getting into the weeds about Patty Solis Doyle and Sidney Blumenthal and Rosie O'Donnell?
Right.
Because I don't.
Right.
Let Kayleigh respond.
I think he wants to move on from these issues. He said at the end, let's talk about ISIS, let's talk about jobs. But let's back up here. And what we saw tonight was a real person acting viscerally about things that happen. And what you saw on the other side was a scripted politician who, instead of being out on the campaign trail for 2 weeks, shaking hands and talking to voters, was calculating her every single word we saw tonight. And I think Donald Trump on any level resonates with the average American people.
There are 320 million real people in America, but one of these
who would
people
all
is
do
going to be
better than our
president of the
politicians,
United
who would
States.
all do better than our all talk, no action, sounds good, doesn't work politicians.
But
line for
let me just
Donald
ask a
Trump
question,
tonight.
though. Do you not, and I don't know the answer to this, as president, don't you want somebody who thinks very, very, very carefully about the words they say? Because as president, doesn't the words you say have global impact, potentially, policy-changing impact around the world?
Sure, of course I want someone who thinks carefully, and I think Donald Trump does, but I think he reacts the way average people react. That being said, he created
do you want
a $10
an average
billion
person in the White House?
He created he's not an average person. He created a $10 billion brand, and he didn't do that by flying off the handle. He did that by negotiating very sensitive deals with world leaders. But he is a real person who understands blue-collar workers and the middle class far more than Hillary Clinton.
Okay, Jeffrey, we haven't heard from you.
All right. In terms of the Clinton campaign spreading rumors that Barack Obama was the other, I want to read the first line from a news story from the International Business Times. It says, a former personal aide to United States President Barack Obama said Monday that false rumors he was a Muslim were, quote, moved along, unquote, by Hillary Clinton staffers in 2008. And they're talking about Reggie Love.
Now, let me say, hey, here's the deal. What if I grant you that? What if I say you are? You
don't have to grant me. Grant Reggie Love.
I will grant you. I will grant you. So what? Are you saying that Donald Trump is so feeble-minded that he has to follow the leadership of some nobody Clinton staffer and spend 5 years?
Senator Obama accused Hillary Clinton personally of this.
Guys, nobody listens.
The body guy.
Guys, nobody listens.
He was his body man. He was the guy who carried his bags and stuff.
Yeah. So he says he was standing right there.
Okay, he was the campaign manager. Let's let him speak.
Let's not get carried away here. The fact of the matter is that Donald Trump carried this. He was the chief proponent of this argument for years until last week. And that's undeniable. I don't even think I agree with you guys. Let's move on. But I don't think he did himself a service tonight. And that's the point.
Overall.
I just think it was very exciting overall, Dana. I thought the outset was great. You walk on, you don't know exactly what to expect. Based on all of the online polls, we did tremendously well.
We haven't had a real poll yet.
Well, but the online polls were fantastic. You get it. When hundreds of thousands of people are calling in and voting, and you have 80 and 90%, you sort of get it.
Anything that you wish you did differently?
No, I'm very happy that I was able to hold back on the on the indiscretions with respect to Bill Clinton, because I have a lot of respect for Chelsea Clinton, and I just didn't want to say what I was going to say, and
Which is,
I'll tell you maybe at the next debate. We'll see. But I'm very happy with the
what about her big moment that she clearly thought that she had in saying she was preparing for the debate, just like she's preparing to be president?
Well, I think she'd be a poor president. I don't think she'd do the job. We need somebody that's going to really be able to do the job. She doesn't have what it takes to make America great again. But we'll see how it all goes. You see the polls. You see what's going on. You see how we're doing. We are going to make America great again. Our country is in such trouble, whether it's immigration, whether it's our jobs being taken, whether it's our factories closing up all over the country, whether it's our military that's been so sadly depleted.
Did it go how you thought it was going to go?
I think it went better than I ever thought. Yeah.
Lost?
How do you think that New York?
No, I loved it. I loved it.
Commit to being at the next debate.
Okay, so we've had a lot of people saying they think Trump did terribly. That's why I want to just hear from you. What is your perspective?
Right.
Oh,
I
big
mean,
picture.
Right out of the gate, he was after her on trade to the point he hit her so hard that she, started to flip-flop on all of this sort of thing. I was looking at now that, let me just add here, the Trump campaign put out a list of these tweets. But still in all, there are tweets from significant people in the Washington Post, the New York Times, et cetera, saying that they thought he was doing a terrific job here. My point to you is, number one, whatever we think about the birtherism thing, I genuinely do not believe people in America who are looking forward and are concerned about their health care, their jobs, taxes, et cetera, give a whit about
but
birtherism.
Overall, how do you think Donald Trump did versus Hillary Clinton?
I thought he was great. And he particularly pursued the business of being the outsider, the rebellion against the standard politician.
Okay. Gloria?
Can I, on the birther issue, just one thing, is that it's the predicate upon which his political career was based for 5 years. He rode that issue to national celebrity after The Apprentice, and it was part of the issue that catapulted him. Secondly, on the tax issue, I think the problem he had is that when Hillary Clinton started talking about it as a bait and switch, not releasing your taxes, et cetera, and she made it very personal. She said that means 0 for troops, 0 for vets, 0 for schools, 0 for health care. And then he said, that makes me smart during the campaign, that he didn't pay his taxes. And then she said, well, what are you trying to hide? And I think that answer resonates with people who say, wait a minute, why am I a chump? I'm paying all this money for schools, vets, et cetera. And when you're president, it's different.
And there was a similar moment where I thought he made a tremendous mistake where where basically the stiffing of the vendors.
Right. Yeah.
And he goes, that's business.
That's smart. That's business.
That's business.
Business,
So
right.
he actually created 2 ads that you're going to see within 12 hours tonight, which I think was a big mistake. The other thing I thought that was very important, because we keep talking about him as if he was the only person there. Hillary Clinton did some stuff that was really good tonight. Can we just give her a little bit of credit? First of all, she wandered into the thicket of race and handled it really, really well. She talked about the criminal justice issues really well. She talked about the private prison stuff you haven't heard on the stage for a national candidate ever, and she did handle that really well. Also, I think it was important that, to the extent that personality matters and that sort of stuff matters, you never saw her get so defensive. And that was a part of why I think she was able to just continue to carry forward. She was prepared and he was not.
Well, also, I'm curious to know, Van, your perspective on when Donald Trump, when the question was about improving, race issues in America, and Donald Trump talked about law and order. I'm wondering
before he got to law and order, he said that we all live in hell. Black people live in hell.
No, he said inner cities.
No, please.
No, he said, play it back. He said inner cities.
He said the question was about race. It wasn't about urban issues. It was about race. And he talks about black people living in hell. That's not good. But then he talks about this law and order thing, and he continues to praise and raise this question of stop and frisk. And I just want to end the mythology right now. That program actually was not effective. Burglaries did not go down. Robberies did not go down. What it did, and frankly, if all they had done was taking guns away from drug dealers, people would have probably been happy. What they did was they stopped thousands and thousands and thousands of innocent African Americans.
But it was like roughly 90%, I think, of the people stopped were African American or people of color, and also had not done anything wrong.
A fraction of a percent had anything wrong. So what did that do? It actually created this ill will. And so then for him to say he wants more stop and frisk and he wants better relations does not go together. And I got to tell you, Donald Trump has botched an opportunity to reach out to the black community. The African-American community is willing to hear someone speak to us about our pain, but not in the way that he does it, the disrespectful way he does it.
What he said tonight was very effective, which is you're going to hear this kind of talk this time of year because guess what? It's an election year, and you're going to hear from Hillary Clinton all of these promises, the same promises she's been making for 30 years that failed to materialize. You know, that was a very effective line. She's had 30 years. She's talking the sweet talk now, but where are the actions that follow up on the talk?
At the outset of the night, I said I wondered which of the Donald Trumps we would see. He who stood on the stage with the Mexican president and seemed presidential, seemed as if he were an individual of stature, or the individual who later that night was in Phoenix at a rally and was vintage Trump. And I think she predetermined which of the Trumps we received tonight, because very early on she used the words trumped up. She then said that he rooted for the housing crisis, and she said that he got a loan from his dad, all within the first 10 or so minutes, at a point where he had stressed the fact that he was calling her Secretary Clinton. And at a certain point, I just think that she pushed his buttons and caused him to become the individual he didn't want to become, and the split screen was not to his satisfaction.
But you know, the thing that I find, if I can make a kind of prosaic political consultant point, all of this was predictable. You know, we heard Jeffrey talk about that exchange between Ronald Reagan and Walter Mondale in 1984 when there were questions about Reagan's his age and his capacities, and he had that line about, I'm not going to take advantage of my opponent's relative youth and inexperience. That was anticipated. He knew that that was an issue, and he prepared for it. Everyone knew some of these issues were going to come up, and yet Donald Trump wasn't prepared for it. It's inexplicable to me. It's malpractice, and you should stop. I think Ronald Reagan was one of the great practitioners of all time, so we shouldn't denigrate him by comparing his performance to Donald Trump.
Let me just call to your attention here, everybody. The 1980 Carter-Reagan debate in Cleveland, I'm looking at the paper the day after from the Cleveland Plain-Dealer. Carter and Reagan trade punches, but both on their feet at the bell. Each candidate leaves the ring without errors. Shortly thereafter, the polls went up for Ronald Reagan because the American people thought he won it. So I'm
probably one of the only other person on this platform who's old enough to remember it, as you are. His numbers went up because there was a question about Ronald Reagan. Is he too extreme? Is he dangerous? And with his performance, he assuaged people's concerns about him. Donald Trump had that opportunity tonight, and he missed the opportunity.
David, but my point is the media reaction was that it was a draw, or that in some cases I looked at that Carter had won. And it turned out to be the other way.
And we could listen. We've been wrong about Donald Trump.
That's what I'm trying to
flag.
But
I mean, I honestly, I believe as I look at these polls and I look at the people who he has yet to persuade, the thing that has been holding them back is, does he have the temperament? And does he have the mastery of basic substance to be president?
I think it was interesting raising the stamina. The stamina issue when she didn't take a drink of water the entire 90 minutes. I was drinking a couple of bottles of water, as was he.
He was sniffling. Here's the deal. He raised the stamina.
No, he did. The moderator did. He didn't raise it.
Well, he has raised it time and time again.
He was asked a question.
He fell for it, and he talked about stamina. And he didn't talk about the looks, which was, probably smart for him not to, since that was offensive. He talked about stamina. He was sniffling. He was drinking water. He seemed like he needed a nap near the end. He faded near the end. Now, Jeffrey and Kayla, you are correct. Most people probably only watch the first 20 or 30 minutes. And in those first 20 or 30 minutes, he was very effective. He was very good on the trade stuff. That is a big weak spot for her. It's a big pain point in our party, and he was great. But he got tricked off into this weird, bizarre stuff where he just basically, I think, lost his way. Let me just say one more thing. It was very important for her to raise gender. Yes. It was important that she raised it the way that she raised it. And I think it was important for her to raise the fact that not only does he say insulting things to women, he says insulting things to women of color. And I thought that was well raised.
But I love the way that she used his words to say those things about women. She didn't, she used his words exactly, and that was very successful for her on the campaign trail when she did that foreign policy speech, and she just laid out everything that he has said, and she did that tonight. I think really the bottom line is qualifications, experience, and preparations matter. And it really matters when you're running for president. And I think that's what we saw tonight. And I loved her line when she said, yes, I did prepare for this debate, and I also prepared to be president of the United States. That was
the one thing that I wish she had done that she
discussion is very important. I think it's a very, very important thing to discuss. But I think it went very well.
And, sir, there was some confusion about how you answered the question about paying taxes. You have paid some federal taxes over the years.
I hate the way our government spends our money. Our government takes our money and they throw it out the window, whether it's in the Middle East or wherever. But I hate the way our government spends our money.
But you have paid federal taxes.
Of course I pay federal taxes.
Mr. Trump. After this experience, any doubt that you'll participate in the next two presidential debates?
No, this was a great experience for me. I really enjoyed it. I think we got our point across. She's not going to make America great again. The one thing I see, and I saw even more than I ever thought I would see, is that she has been saying these things for years, and nothing ever happens. They never get fixed. It's all talk, no action. It's like just all talk. And she's been saying the things we've been discussing and discussed up on the dais. She has been saying this for years, and all it is talk. It never happens. And to me, that's very
Any regrets in saying when you refer to the president as your president as opposed to the nation's president? There's been some Twitter reactions that you said your president as opposed to the nation.
Well, he's everybody's president. He's the president, so he's everybody's.
Mr. Trump, any estimate on your federal taxes?
I think we've lost him on mic, so let's go back to David.
What I was saying is that I wish she had in places invoked the stories of real people to animate the points she was making. She speaks sometimes in policy terms.
It was interesting, though, the specific stories she told about her father, which she then brought back in to try to use against Donald Trump.
Did. She mentioned her granddaughter at the beginning. But all of these problems that she was talking about tonight have human faces across this country. And she's met these people, and they've undoubtedly touched her. And she could have done a better job of bringing them into the discussion.
I do think, one of the criticisms of Hillary Clinton in August particularly was that she let Trump be Trump too much and wasn't more assertive. And I did think you're right. At times, she could have been more assertive. She could have gotten in there more, told these stories. It seemed like she was listening to Paul Begala. She mentioned her granddaughter. She mentioned her own father as well. I did think the anecdote at the end about the Latina woman who Donald Trump named Mrs. Housekeeper, that is something that I'd never heard and is disturbing. And I think the birther thing, to go back to that, I think the problem with the birther thing, it isn't that it hurts black people's feelings. It's that it proves to certain people that Donald Trump was willing to embrace a racist conspiracy theory to advance his own political agenda. And that has all sorts of implications about how he would govern and how he would frame issues. That's the real problem with it, and she got at that.
Except, of course, this charge having been raised against 5 white guys, including one sitting president, and all of them Republicans, it's not a racist theory. It's just a crazy theory, maybe. I mean, I thought Barack Obama was born in Hawaii, but lots of Democrats in 1881 were saying Chester Alan Arthur was born in Canada. Lots of people. The New York Times ran a story in February 28th.
Jeff, you guys always say that. There you go again.
But Van, it's about equality of treatment. It's about equality of treatment for presidents and presidential
Somebody
candidates.
should stand up for Chester A. Arthur.
Let Van respond.
Exactly.
Listen, I first of all, I did not know any of the things that you said until you started educating the country about these other instances. And there's a reason for that. Because it didn't actually matter in those days the way that it matters now. Context matters. The same thing you do 100 years from now, if you do it today, it lands differently. And I think that you know in your heart that the way that this was received and the way that it was driven had racial implications. And here's what I love about you. You give us these history lessons, but part of what you often do is you try to normalize things that actually are abnormal. And in this situation, the way this president was treated on this issue was abnormal. And for somebody to spend 5 years on it after the birth certificate the birth certificate was produced 5 years ago, and he's still on it.
Dan, have you heard about Ted Cruz and Donald Trump
sure.
questioning his eligibility? This was not.
Also Latino?
He asked a question of a politician, which every citizen has the right to do, and Donald Trump did it. He got the answer. He moved on.
So
And
the black guy and the Latino.
I think we are all overlooking one of the key moments of
five
tonight's.
white guys.
We are all overlooking one of the key moments of tonight's debate when we saw the prosecution of a politician live before our eyes when Donald Trump pushed Hillary Clinton to the point of basically having to admit, yes, I am for NATO, despite standing up here and saying I'm against trade deals. I did call it the gold standard, despite now saying I'm against TPP. I did call South Korea a great trade deal, and now I'm against all of this. So we saw the prosecution of a politician that will play over well with citizens.
Brianna Keeler is standing by. Brianna?